Hello everyone, Nubkeks here, and in today's video we're taking a look at the Mythic raid testing for some of the later bosses in the raid. We have 3 bosses to get through today. Of course, Kel'thuzad's going to be the first one we look at on Mythic here today, and this is the hardest boss we're going to see on Mythic difficulty. Sylvanas is unlikely to be tested on Mythic. They usually save that for live servers entirely. So yeah, of course, check out the heroic Sylvanas video to see what's going on with that fight. The first boss we're going to look at in today's video is the 9th and penultimate boss of the raid. It's Kel'thuzad. And he was already hard enough on heroic difficulty, so everything has been amped up on Mythic. This guy is looking pretty spooky. The general structure of the fight is actually the exact same as heroic was, so you're still doing phase 1 multiple times, right? So you do phase 1 where you fight Kel'thuzad, you kill him off, and then he starts to regenerate in the intermission phase in his phylactery. You have to do this 3 different times, because while most of the team in the intermission is outside and they're fighting waves of abominations and banshees and just controlling those, you have the phylactery team, the inside team. They go into the phylactery, they kill, or they knock 1/3 of the health off of the remnant of Kel'thuzad, knock 1/3 health off. You have to do it 3 times, and the difficulty of everything is just ramping up while that happens, and then you go into the final phase. For the first phase, as far as I can tell, there are actually no major mechanical differences. It's just that there are more of the mechanics happening at the same time, which just exponentially increases the difficulty, I would say. So one thing that happens straight off is that when the tanks take the tank mechanic, which shatters off all these souls, you'll see all the ghostly versions of the tank around the edge of the room. That seems to shatter off more souls now. So you've got more of those adds to keep interrupted and to cleave down. On top of that, the silence circles that go on players, it also seems like you get more of those. And actually, this is one thing that we hadn't realized when I did the heroic testing for this boss, but you can actually use those silence circles that go on players to interrupt the adds that spawn from the tanks. So that's a really cool and interesting mechanic, an overlap. They don't always overlap at all, but when they do, it does mean that you're a lot more relaxed in terms of actually having kick assignments for those adds and how fast you actually need to kill them. Unfortunately, our raid group, we couldn't get a full 20 people at the time. The regular group I have been doing all these raids with weren't actually doing this boss, so I had to pug around, and it didn't go so well. I've got a couple of different groups, so I'll show you footage from both of them. But the place that basically both teams that I actually did some testing with were struggling was with the glacial spikes. These things are absolutely brutal. So on Mythic difficulty, the first time you're in P1, the first time, yes, it gets worse. You get 4 of these spikes spawn at the same time. Now, these can be baited by players, and I actually do suspect that you're going to want to bait these to very, very specific positions. It's actually going to be very important because you do not want to kill these or even cleave these or hurt them at all by accident. Now, these spikes are automatically dying. Yeah, they lose 5% health every 2 seconds. So, well, in 20 seconds, they lose half their life. In 40 seconds, they're just automatically dead, even if you do literally 0 damage to them. So 40 seconds is the absolute max. Whenever they explode, they do a big chunk of raid-wide damage, and they also put a pretty hard-hitting dot on you that does stack, and that dot lasts for 10 seconds. So you can see things are getting pretty tight, right? So the spikes spawn in, the glacial spikes spawn in. Even if you instantly kill, okay, let's say that's unrealistic. Let's say it takes you 5 seconds to kill the first spike, which is being, I'd say that's even being fairly generous. That seems pretty difficult to do. It takes you 5 seconds to kill the first spike. You're now 5 seconds into the timer, 10 seconds for the debuff. You're now 15 seconds in. Then you instantly kill the next spike as soon as that debuff drops off. That brings you to 25 seconds. Kill the next one. That brings you to 35 seconds. And then you've got like 5 seconds grace period to kill the last one. It's pretty tight. That's very, very tight. The general strategy that the group seemed to be adopting was that you would trigger 2 spikes pretty close together and try to use mitigation, defensive cooldowns, and healing cooldowns to basically get through the 2 explosions and a double stack of the dot. And the idea here was that it's much easier. It takes a lot of pressure off you in terms of managing when you kill those spikes. Instead of being this super strict DPS check, it becomes a lot more forgiving, right? Kill 2 spikes pretty quickly. Once the dot is gone and everything is stable, kill off the 3rd spike, that's fine. And then you've got quite a bit of time left to kill off the 4th spike. Or you don't even kill the 4th spike, you would just leave it to do its own thing. So that could be the strategy. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. The thing that makes me definitely think that you probably will be killing 2 at a time and using major cooldowns to survive through it is the fact that every time you come back to P1, it increases the number of the silent circles, and it also increases the number of glacial spikes. So you get 4 in the first P1. The second P1, I'm presuming you get 5. And then the third P1, I presume you get 6. So that's going to be really rough. Like, honestly, that is going to be extremely hard. It is the major difficulty thing of the fight. Certainly the first half of the fight, no question. But it's pretty intimidating, guys. So yeah, it's the second last boss. This is going to be very hard. You're going to need specific DPS checks, specific assignments, specific healing assignments, kind of the stuff you would expect at this point, to be fair. In general, then, for this first phase, I certainly think split cleave is pretty much king, right? Because you want to be killing all these ghosts around the edges. You want to be killing all the suicide bomber ads that spawn out of every silent circle that drops down. It spawns an ad which fixates a player. If it reaches that player, it explodes and basically kills them. So you want to be cleaving all that stuff down whilst also damaging the boss, whilst also killing the correct glacial spike. So split cleave is going to be pretty nuts here. You can also see part of the problem in terms of if you do not position those glacial spikes correctly. Let's say you've got 1 or 2 balance druids. If Starfall is in range of the last glacial spike, which you do not want to kill early, you could very easily push it through just by some accidental cleave and stuff like that. So it's actually going to be quite important, like I said, I think, to position the glacial spike so that sort of stuff doesn't happen. I'm not 100% sure if you can do it all that consistently. For the intermission phase then, which unfortunately we did not get to, but for this intermission phase, this has also got a couple of new mechanics. So for the outside team, it is still, as far as I know, the same. You still have abominations coming in, which do frontal attacks, and you've got banshees, which do casts that you need to interrupt. So I think that is still basically the same. For the inside group, however, there are a couple of new mechanics. So the first one, the big one, is that the Remnant of Kel'Thuzad is now going to do this Deathly Wind attack, which is going to try to push you off of the platform. I might actually stick in some footage of the heroic testing so you get a rough idea of what's actually going on here. But yeah, this extra wind is going to make it a lot more difficult. On top of that, the shadow fissures that he's spawning, all these swirlies you have to dodge, are going to start leaving these permanent pools on the ground. So this is going to get an awful lot harder. And of course, bear in mind that every time you do this intermission, he casts these abilities more and more frequently. So the first time you're in is going to be kind of tough. The second time, very tough. And the third time is going to be an absolute crazy, insane affair where you're being blown all over the place. There's shit all over the floor. He's firing off these big ice blasts left, right, and center. It's going to be extremely intense. So I think certainly specs. Yeah, you're definitely going to have to plan around that. You're going to have to massively plan cooldowns. You know, fire mages are extremely good at this from what I could see with their burst damage. They can ice block if they need to. They've got their blinks to escape from the winds if they're stuck. So yeah, that sort of stuff is definitely what you're going to have to consider to try to beat this boss. That actually reminds me, it's one thing I forgot, but the soak mechanic in P1, this is super nasty, guys. This is really, really nasty. The soak mechanic does about, I think it's 220 damage. Sorry, 220,000 damage split between everyone that soaks it. But then the big problem is that it also roots them with a really nasty dot. And, well, you're rooted when you're being chased by suicide bomber ads and you need to be dropping circles in particular spaces and glacial spikes in particular spaces, blah, blah, blah. It's really nasty. So I'm not 100% sure how you're actually going to deal with that. I mentioned this because I was just talking about mages. I certainly think that specs with immunities are going to be kind of nuts here. Like, instead of having to deal with this massive soak mechanic and getting exactly 10 people in, having 2 master spells assigned to get it done, and having to rotate that sort of stuff around so that it's available for every single cast, if you can just have a mage blink out an ice block and the mechanic is gone entirely, that makes a huge difference. So I do think that some immunity stacking specs are going to be pretty good here. In the final phase, which again, obviously we did not get to, the glacial spikes aren't there, so that makes that a lot easier, right? The hardest part, I think, about the regular P1 is gone. However, the ice patches that he periodically summons on the floor, I think they're going to spawn in more frequently, and they will be permanent in that final phase. So after you've done the 3 intermissions and the remnant is dead. So it's going to be kind of a crazy burn. All of the ads from outside in the intermission keep spawning, so the abominations and the banshees. So yeah, it sounds like a pretty intense race to the end. Part of me though is almost wondering if it might not be easier in practice than the third time you have to do P1 with potentially 6 glacial spikes at the same time. I don't know. Obviously, I haven't got to play these, so I don't know. But yeah, the whole second half of this fight sounds like it's going to be extremely, extremely hard. And that is, well, it's basically that for Kel'Thuzad. This is going to be a hard boss. I'm almost 100% sure this boss is going to be extremely, extremely hard. I am concerned, I will say. I'm very concerned about stacking classes. I really am. I think that stacking immunity classes, stacking classes that can do sort of split cleave or good cleave damage, I think could be very, very important. We'll have to see exactly how it works out, but I will be honest, I do have some pretty big concerns about that. The most interesting thing, though, for me, I suppose, is what to think about this boss. I've heard a lot of people, I'm pretty sure I saw Limit Max saying that he thinks this boss is absolutely awesome. I think after heroic testing is when I saw him say that, which kind of surprised me. Personally, I hate this boss. I really do not like this boss, but then I've heard a lot of people say really good things about it. So I'm curious what you think. Basically, my position is this. For me, I enjoy challenging bosses, but I don't want them to be like crazy insanely hard, to be completely honest. I kind of prefer bosses that have a really cool theme, really unique encounter mechanics, really unique environmental design. And I don't think Kel'Thuzad really hits that mark for me. You know, I was going to say it's like a boss you've seen before. This is literally a boss we've seen in 2 expansions already, kind of coming back. So it sort of throws back to that. And I feel like it is relatively old encounter design, right? You're just fighting in the room, ads and stuff are spawning in, like you drop the pools out, the spikes are there. It's a bit boring, to be honest. For me, it's a little bit boring. It's just fighting the boss in a room. It's something that we've done a billion times before. There's nothing particularly new or exciting that jumps out. I think the intermission, killing the remnant, I think that is kind of cool. But yeah, I would give a good comparison would be King Rastakhan from Battle of Dazar'alor in BFA. That was one of my favorite bosses of the entire expansion. Now, Rastakhan was too easy, unfortunately. He was a bit too easy, but I kind of preferred that. There was a whole bunch of really cool, unique mechanics going on there. The intermission phase was really interesting and different. There's just so much cool lore built into it. I thought that was an awesome boss. I kind of feel like Kel'Thuzad it's the worst Rastakhan. It's harder, but less fun. So, I don't know. Again, this is my personal opinion. That's my personal take. Let me know what you think, especially obviously if you raided in those previous expansions and you actually fought Kel'Thuzad at the time. What do you think of this boss? As sort of a throwback to that. But yeah, for me, I don't know. I almost prefer Eye of the Jailer, which was painfully boring, but I almost prefer the Eye of the Jailer encounter to Kel'Thuzad. This is honestly, it's probably the boss I'm least looking forward to so far in the raid. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking right now. We'll see how my opinion changes with more looks at him. Next up, we're looking at Painsmith Raznal, and this has been updated a fair bit since last time we looked at it. So obviously on heroic difficulty, there were a bunch of exploits that you could do, like getting up on the chains, holding the platform over the lava, so you could avoid all the mechanics while still being able to fight the boss. You could warlock gateway over to the platforms at the side of the encounter, things like that. All that stuff apparently has been fixed. So they've really cut down a lot of the exploits, which is fine. That's pretty good. Also, one of the big question marks we had on heroic difficulty was the rolling ball mechanic, which was very inconsistent. They would sometimes despawn at the edge so you can make your way around, but not always. Sometimes they would move in a strict line and there were no gaps to go through. Sometimes, though, the balls would sort of space themselves out a bit so you could actually slip through. It was quite inconsistent and unclear how they wanted you to deal with it. This is now much more straightforward. The line of balls, again, you'll see it very visual. All it does, it just spawns in, it rolls across the encounter, right? It spawns in, they roll across the encounter. I feel like they're quicker now, but they have a lot less health. Certainly that's the way it felt compared to heroic difficulty. So essentially you just target the ball in the middle, kill the ball in the middle, and then there's a gap to move through the wall. So that's simple and straightforward. It's just sort of like a time limit thing. Kill the balls before they knock you off the edge. One other mechanical change, which has happened to the fight too, which is worth noting, is they have swapped the first and the second phase mechanic. So now on the first phase, the boss, when he throws his weapon at the tank, it now explodes in a cross shape of spikes. So again, you'll see that very visually. It makes a cross shape. Then in P2, the second time you do it, it makes this expanding square of spikes that just slowly expands across the encounter space. That's the second phase now. So they flip those from heroic testing, which I think is good. And then, of course, phase 3, the third time you fight him after the second intermission, he does both of the mechanics. So you get the big cross shape, and then you get the expanding circle of spikes as well. Now, one of the other big changes here is that whenever the boss, this is the mythic mechanic, whenever the boss throws spikes, throws the weapon at the tank, which triggers that whatever cross shape or expanding square of spikes, whatever phase you happen to be in, it will now also trigger a smaller cross-shaped wave of spikes from the 3 players that have the spinny circle of doom on them, let's say the spinning chains of doom. So the easiest way I can show this to you, okay, right? So we have this is the platform. It's a 13 by 13 grid. So I'm going to show it to you visually, and bearing in mind sort of some of the placements here of these marks. Here we go. This is a 13 by 13 grid. So I have co-opted someone who made a word search puzzle. But the idea here, again, you can see we've got, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then a middle slot. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So like this. So again, I think what you will do is you would have, let's say star would be up here. Okay, cool. And let's say green then would be, what? This is the middle one, isn't it? I hope so. No, it's not. I've missed it. This is the middle one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, here we go. Perfect. And then this one over here is the middle. And then let's say purple will be down here. So you would mark, I think, each of these different middle sections, which is what we actually did. This is just purely to give you a reference point for the wave of balls, right? You could even mark, let's say, you could even mark this one or this one here, right? And this is purely for a visual. This is to go, okay, the wave of balls has come in. Holy crap, there's 13 balls. Which one is the middle again? Okay, it's the one that's moving over the star mark. That's where we'll go. And again, you just need one on each face of the platform because the wave of balls can spawn from anywhere. Okay, so that is the first thing you would do. Now, in terms of dealing with the tank mechanic, again, you'll be tanking the boss, let's say roughly around the middle of the room, which is right there. Now, to deal with this tank mechanic, let's take, I don't know, let's get some lovely pastel colors. So the tank could go and drop his chunk over here. In fact, let me make this a different layer so that it's easy to turn on and off. So the tank could drop his thing over there. And what this is going to do, it makes, in P1, it makes this cross shape. So it would make spikes like along here as well. We don't need to deal with those because they're off the platform, but it would make a wave of spikes like this direction. And again, it's going to make a 2 by 2 set. So it would also go down like this, right? So all of that would be covered. And then likewise, it would come across this way as well and across this way as well. And again, visually, if this was more, it would go also over here and would also go like, you know, down here and also up that way and whatever. It would also go this way, this way, this way, this way, right? So it's a big 3 by 3 explosion effectively. So that is sort of the danger zone covered by the tank. Now, what you would also do at the same time, again, let's make another layer to be clear. You would use something like star, orange, and I'm not sure what the other color was actually. Let's just say whatever, moon, something like that. So these guys would go here, and this makes it a 1 by 1 lines, right? So from this player, it would make spikes go this way, this way, this way. You see how this is going to work out, and this way. This player would have spikes go here, come from the right of orange over this way, from the left of orange this way, and then bottom from orange this way, and then star again would have them come from this direction and this direction, and then of course off the platform. So this is how it would look. So as you can see, the middle is actually perfectly safe. The middle is safe. None of these players actually get hit. They don't hit each other. They don't hit each other, so they are safe. They don't hit themselves, so they are safe. This did seem a bit buggy to us, like on the raid testing. The way our team had it set up was they'd have instead of the markers like this in a diagonal to the tank, which I think is what you want to do, they had them like kind of perpendicular to the tank. They had them like this, which is kind of weird. It didn't work. I'm not sure why it didn't work, but it didn't, and they just died. But I did see some streams and stuff of people, and they did it like this, and that worked just fine. So that's what you're going to do in P1. In P2, you would still do the same thing, but instead of having the cross coming out from the tank, this cross over here would be gone, and it's just like this wave of, like this square of spikes would come out. So that stuff would still be there, but this stuff would be gone, right? So if I show you the other P2, so let's say that the tank would come over here. We should probably use a different color. We'll just use black, whatever, it's fine. Black, and then you would basically have like this square would form, and then like this, and then like this. So this is the geometry boss, right? As you can tell, and then like this, and so on. But these people still make their cross. And essentially, this is the strategy you use throughout the whole fight, right? You have the tank go to one corner. The other guys line up in a diagonal line to that tank in another corner. They always make this cross shape, but the tank will go from, you know, from the cross shape to the expanding squares. And then obviously in the final phase, he does both the cross shape and the expanding squares. But the rule of thumb, you just always do it like this. There's never any reason not to do it like this. Where it does get tricky, where it gets tricky is, let's say you were like this, but unfortunately, we have the wall of balls has spawned like this and is going to be moving around the room like this, right? And then like this. What do you do if the wall of balls is here? You've got these players stuck over here. How does the tank get around? So again, there's a few strategies you can use. Number one, you could have a Vengeance Demon Hunter can glide around. I wonder if a warrior could jump over and Heroic Leap, could jump off the edge of Heroic Leap. You can also use Warlock Gateways to get past. Let me think, what else could you do? This is really sort of the question. You can Soul Shape over it. You can Venthyr teleport over it. So there are ways around it. Monks could preemptively put down a teleport circle and get over it. So that is one of the big overlaps. But as far as I can tell, that seems to be the structure of P1, is that you should get three of these weapon throws per phase is basically what you're going to deal with. 3 of these weapon throws. And the second one overlaps with the line of balls. So you need a way to get around it. Again, Vengeance completely nullifies it. Covenant abilities will basically nullify it. But it is something you're going to have to plan around. You need one tank. To make this easy, you need one tank to be able to get past this wall of balls. That is pretty much essential. Like if the tank tried to drop it like over here, there's just no way, because they'd send lines all this way and they'd murderize these 2 players, right? You'd have to use 2 battle reses. Not so good. Possibly if you were super stuck, you could have these 3 players like here, here, and here, but that gets very difficult. Space is going to get really constricted and it's very likely you just end up murdering everyone. So that is sort of how that's looking. Okay, so I hope I haven't blown your brains out or anything like that. The geometry boss is real. The other big mechanic in the main phase that you do have to deal with is traps. This is kind of like a healing throughput check. This is quite a bit more forgiving compared to the glacial spikes we saw on Kel'thuzad, but it follows a similar sort of pattern. Basically, 4 traps are going to spawn targeted at players. Whenever these traps are hit by the spikes or by the spiked balls, they will explode, right? They will explode, and they do a bunch of AoE to everyone, and they also increase the damage you'll take from the explosions by 150% for 2 seconds. So effectively, it's very, very, very important that these are spaced out 2 seconds. You need that debuff to be gone. The easiest way, I think, to do this is to simply have the off tank, the tank that is not currently tanking the boss, would be in charge of triggering these. So they step into the first one, they trigger it. 2 seconds later, the debuff goes, they step in the next one, trigger it, wait for the debuff to drop, hit the next one, and just have it manually controlled like that. Blow them all up over the course of, 6 to 7 seconds or so. Do that through a barrier, have AMZs, Aura Mastery, whatever, Devotion Aura Mastery, healing cooldowns, and you just heal through it, get rid of those traps. You could have them possibly intentionally triggered by spiked balls or stuff like that, but I really don't see the purpose of doing it. To me, that seems way too difficult. You would just intentionally get rid of these one by one. And yeah, just avoid them ever being auto-triggered. Control it yourself, have it sync up with healing cooldowns, have it, you are the master, basically. I think that is the way to handle this for sure. And then finally for the intermission, which we never got to, sadly, it's mostly the same as Heroic. Basically, you have these lines of spikes are going to be traveling over the floor. You've got one safe space to go through, so just keep going through the safe space. Dodge these fire swirlies and just be AoEing down the adds that spawn from the fire swirlies. The one difference here, the one change, is that whenever you kill these adds, they will also drop a swirly that will one-shot anyone that touches it. So again, just be careful in terms of killing the ads. Be aware that they now drop a swirly on death that will kill you as well, and avoid that. And that's the intermission, right? So it's just surviving, basically, just moving. It's not too crazy difficult, but it's just being controlled, being calm, and then going back and doing P1 again. So what do I think of this fight? This is the 6th boss in the raid, so it's like pretty much just in the middle point of the raid in theory. Of course, we don't know if there's going to be wings and stuff set up. I'm not sure what the route through the raid's going to be, but this should be a middle difficulty boss. But I absolutely love this. I think this is a fantastic boss. I think visually it's super cool, right? It is just super cool. The geometry aspect of, you know, drawing the spikes on the floor, and the fact that you can make like a chessboard style diagram and show exactly where they're going to go. I think that's just really fun. I love the idea of like the wall of spiked balls just rolling down on you, a focus fire, and open up a spot, open up a free spot, and then move through that free space. I think that is super cool as well. You know, there's quite a lot of active stuff for the tanks to do in terms of being in charge of managing the traps, in terms of managing where they get those weapon throws going. That stuff I think is quite fun. So yeah, I just like this a lot. There's a lot of great stuff going on here. I know a lot of you guys were leaving really positive comments the first time we saw this boss, even though it was really buggy at the time. But I think they've done a great job. Again, the one big thing really to watch out for on this boss, for sure, is classes that can teleport or blink past the spiked balls make this way easier. They really do. The big concern for me, no question, is having a tank that can do it. You can kind of get away with a lot of your specs and classes not being able to do it. But having your tank able to get past those spike balls is actually really important, because like I said, one of the big hard parts of the phase is where you get the weapon throw overlapping with the spiked balls. So just, yeah, having your tank being able, you know, a brewmaster being able to just transcend past the balls and just drop the weapon where you perfectly want it makes it so much easier. Let me know what you think, and let's take a look at the final boss we're going to be looking at today, Fatescribe Roh'Kalo. Alright, this is the third last boss of the instance. I actually misspoke at the end of the last segment, but Fatescribe Roh'Kalo is who he is, and this is a boss that I felt was way better on Mythic difficulty than it was on Heroic. On Heroic, I was actually quite worried that the boss could end up being fairly boring. Not so anymore, though, not so. There are a bunch of new mechanics in the main phase, P1, of this fight on Mythic difficulty that set it apart from Heroic. So the first big one, which is relatively simple, but you know, it starts to add up when you add on other things, is that for the big silency circle type things that he drops on you, again, we've seen lots of bosses do this, but on Mythic difficulty now, when these explode, they actually send out these waves of balls, right? These were previously only seen in the intermission phase on Heroic. Now these show up on Mythic as well. So you got loads of these big circles. You have to run them out of the raid, just get them nearer to the edge of the room, and then yeah, these waves of balls are going to come out, so you have to keep dodging those balls. Another massive change here on Mythic difficulty is that the Fated Conjunction lasers have different patterns now, guys. They've got different patterns, which seem to me to be randomized. So on Heroic difficulty, it would always fire a bank of 5 lasers that were right beside each other. They all kind of cut through the middle of the room, and you essentially have 2 pizza slices opposite each other going off. On Mythic difficulty, you could still have that alignment, but then you could also have sort of 3 lasers sort of equidistantly spaced around the room go off. So it makes, I don't know, like a sort of pattern through. I can't even describe it, but it makes a different pattern. And yeah, there maybe are even other patterns that we haven't seen yet as well. Those are the ones that I did see. I would say, as a rough rule of thumb for how to deal with this mechanic, basically you want to be close to the back of the room and close to the edge of one of these lasers when it goes off, and that is where you're going to be safe, right? There's always going to be a safe space beside an existing laser, so that is the easiest way to deal with it. That's the rough rule of thumb. The big new Mythic mechanic, though, for this main phase is called Grim Portent, and this is awesome. So Fatescribe is going to bind up to 10 different players to runes that are on the floor, right? On these rings on the floor. You've got 12 seconds to get to your assigned rune, and so long as everyone reaches their rune, they all just take about 14,000 shadow damage. If any one player is not within their rune at the end of the countdown, it will do 74,000 shadow damage to everyone in the raid. So it basically wipes the raid. How do you know which rune is yours? Well, there's basically a gigantic arrow, an absolutely massive grey arrow pointing towards the correct rune. So it's not too hard to get there, to be honest with you. It's not too hard. But it is just a cool and iconic mechanic, something you have to watch out for. And this obviously overlaps other stuff as well, right? So you have to get to your rune whilst also, you know, if there's any balls spinning around from those previous explosions, you have to obviously avoid getting hit by any of the balls. If a Fated Conjunction bank of lasers is going to fire off around there, you have to make sure that you're not going to get hit by it. You have to still be killing the tank ad. I haven't mentioned this yet, but of course the tank mechanic, it does fall off damage. They drop it far away. It spawns an ad which fixates the tank. So they can sort of, you know, kite it in a circle to keep it always under the boss, and you can cleave it down. So you have to keep cleaving down that ad, make sure it dies and never reaches the tank, or again, it wipes the raid. But yeah, all things considered, it means that this main phase of the fight, it's a lot more exciting now. It is way more exciting than it was on heroic difficulty. You have to be running around to, you know, get to your correct rune on time. So that whole mechanic is new. Obviously then those exploding circles that you're putting on the floor that spit out balls now, they stay permanently every single time you are in phase 1. They get reset then whenever you go into an intermission, but it does mean that the P1 is going to ramp up in difficulty. It's going to be harder to drop those exploding circles in safe spaces because the previous exploding circles are going to explode again. It also means there's going to be more and more waves of these balls coming out, which just makes it more intense. It makes it harder to dodge the laser banks, which are now randomized. It makes it harder to get to your runes on time. It makes it harder for the tank to escape, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think it's a good solid P1 now with stuff going on. It's pretty awesome. Unfortunately, we never got to the intermission though. We never quite got there. But there are a bunch of new effects for this intermission as well. So the intermission phase, the boss goes to the middle of the room, he sort of pushes everyone away, and he's immune to damage effectively. And then you have to rotate these different rings, right? You have to rotate the rings. When an even number of players stand on a rune on the ring, it will go counterclockwise. When an odd number of players stand on it, it goes clockwise. The Mythic difficulty adjustments, though, are that only certain players will be able to stand on certain rings. You will have runic affinity. So I assume it's going to be like the Grim Portent effect, where you'll have a big arrow pointing towards the rune that you personally can move, and that you won't be able to move any of the other ones. And that's going to be randomized. So you can't have a set team to deal with this. You have to have players react dynamically depending on what their runic affinity is. That's my understanding of how this is going to work. That might sound a little bit difficult, but not too bad. Well, what makes this harder, though, is also this other mechanic, the Exposed Threads of Fate, which is whenever a player with runic affinity starts manipulating the loom, so whenever they start to turn their ring, it's going to start shooting these basically electricity all along the ring, which is going to do like 40,000 damage every 3 seconds to anyone that touches one of those threads. So it's basically going to kill you, which means that whenever someone is going to spin a ring, nobody else can be on that ring or they're going to get bezapped. It's pretty bad. It does also look like, looking at the journal, that they have added a new type of ad to this intermission phase. When we did this on heroic testing, they were just the fate spawn anomalies, right? They were just these little mini ads were spawning in from the edge of the room. So just group them up, AoE them down. It looks like there's now a fate spawn monstrosity, which is going to be there on heroic difficulty 2 for sure. This monstrosity is going to keep ramping up in damage. It can put dots on people that tick really hard and also slow their movement speed, so quite nasty. So definitely some big single target damage to kill off that monstrosity quickly is going to be very important. But yeah, I think this intermission is going to be very tough, right? It's going to be very tough, right? So you have to control the ads, keep the ads controlled, keep the big ad, the monstrosities controlled and killed off quickly. That's going to be a very important DPS check, and also for the healers to keep everyone alive through it. And then you're also going to have random people, you know, a random selection of people having to go figure out their rings and turning their rings in the right direction, getting them to their markers on the right at the right time, while also having the raid move and not be stood on the rings that are turning, to very much be careful to avoid that. Otherwise, you're going to get zapped. I think it's going to be quite tricky. There's going to be quite a lot of stuff going on there. And I think it's going to be pretty cool. I think it's going to be quite fun. From what I can tell then, the final phase looks to be still the same. I think it still looks to be the same. So this is when you've got him through, I think, 2 of these regular intermissions, maybe 3. You go into the final phase where you're just going to kill him, which is where you do have to move those rings whilst also dealing with the P1 mechanics. So you're dealing with all the Call of Eternity explosions and all the orbs that they're shooting out, when you're dealing with the Fated Conjunction laser banks, when you're dealing with the tank ads, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, you're going to have to turn the rings during that. It does appear, though, that the mythic additions to the ring turning, i.e. only certain players being able to turn certain rings, it looks like that's not going to happen in P3. So anyone can turn them. It also looks like they're not going to shoot out like all the electric laser stuff that's going to electrocute anyone that's stood on the ring that's not supposed to be. It looks like that's also gone, so that's a bit more forgiving. And therefore, it also looks like the Grim Portent, which is, 10 runes light up, the right player goes to the right rune. It looks like that mechanic doesn't happen at the very end either. So it is a more straightforward sort of rush to burn down the boss on time, just finish him off, burn him down, whilst also, again, just whatever, having your set teams of players it looks like you could have go and turn the rings. So yeah, again, I think this boss looks great. Man, this boss is so much better on Mythic difficulty. Phase 1 is way more interesting. Phase 2, instead of being a relatively boring phase for most people where you're just sort of sitting there AFK, randomly AoEing some ads while a couple of set players just go and turn the rings, that's not going to be the case anymore, right? That's not the case. The intermission phase is now way more intense, where anyone really could be chosen to have to turn a specific ring, and you have to react to it, you have to plan with it, you have to communicate with your team and turn the ring. The extra ad they've added to the intermission gives some intensity to that for everyone else, anyone that's not chosen. That getting priority damage out, getting good control out now actually matters an awful lot more. So there you go, guys. They are the 3 bosses we saw today on Mythic difficulty. I'm kind of curious, very much so, what you think, because like I said, I'm not a fan at all of Kel'thuzad. I think the Kel'thuzad encounter looks, honestly, to me, quite dull and very difficult. So personally, I have zero anticipation. It's more so dread for this one right now. Obviously, I'll try to keep an open mind, though. And maybe when we get there, hopefully I actually will really enjoy it, and it will be really good, and it will be really fun. So we shall see. But yeah, I'm skeptical about it and a bit concerned. However, the other 2 bosses we saw today, I actually think are fantastic. Painsmith Raznal, I just love the theme of that fight. So cool, dodging all the spikes, working around it. The geometry boss, right? The geometry boss. I just think it's really fun, and I love that sort of environmental thing. I mean, you guys have heard me just give rave reviews of Blackrock Foundry before, and like Hans and Franz, Operator Thogar, all that sort of stuff. That environmental gameplay. It's so tangible, it's so immersive. So I love that boss. I think that boss is gonna be great fun and not too difficult either. Fatescribe Roh'Kalo, then he's the 3rd last boss of the instance, so just before you do Kel'thuzad, most likely. And this guy looks like he's gonna be quite hard, but again, this guy's got a whole bunch of cool, interesting new mechanics, right? A whole bunch of really interesting stuff going on. Really all about that Loom of Fate, all these rings on the floor, rotating them. Much more dynamic fight on Mythic difficulty, much more dynamic, where random people are gonna have to go and move those rings on Mythic in the intermission. Yeah, just more mechanics added in, so there's actually stuff going on. Lots of stuff to dodge, to be considering about in terms of your movement, your positioning. So yeah, this boss seems like, again, it's going to be really cool, and we might actually have a gimmick boss here that's actually good. Gimmick bosses are often kind of annoying and bad, but I think this one does have the potential. I mean, I might be cursing my words. I might be looking back on this in 2 months or 3 months or whatever and face palming and going, what was I thinking? This boss sucks. But from what I can see right now, this boss actually looks like a gimmick boss with this cool, moving rings on the floor thing. That's actually awesome. So we'll see. Guys, that has been the video. Let me know what you think. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.